What I want to talk about tonight is Explorer of the Universe, the summer targets. For those of you who weren't here when we did the opening thing for this series last spring, we will talk about those things to get you caught up. So the RASC has all kinds of observing programs for people to explore the sky, and you can get certificates and pins for those programs. With me at the Vancouver Center meeting, handing out one of those. The one I want to talk about primarily tonight is Explore the Universe. The third edition has just gone to the printers. Here's the cover there for the third edition. I'm the editor for that. For this, you don't need anything more complicated than binoculars or a small telescope. Find half of the 110 objects. You get a certificate and pin. You don't even have to be a member of the RASC to get this. So it's well worth checking out. So what you need for this is 12 of 24 constellations and bright stars. You need 60 objects on the moon. You need 5 solar system objects. You need 12 deep sky objects out of 24, 10 double stars, and that'll get you the certificate. So we have constellations, 24 of them, and you need to find half of these. And the reason they've chosen these particular ones, you'll notice some of them are probably recognizable as signs of the zodiac, but there's a whole bunch of others in there. And the reason they've chosen them is because these all have the brightest stars in the sky. Why would you need to know that? Because if you're trying to find your way around the sky, these are signposts. These are key points that you would need to find. If you're going to do a 2-star alignment on a telescope up at the observatory, these are the stars you're going to use to do that. So you need to know these, or at least some of them. Lunar phases, that's pretty easy to do. Get 4 of those and you're on your way. Lunar basins, there's the list there of the 12, and you can see the best days to view these are listed as well. You find that in the program, which you can download free from the website. There they are. I found this person who actually made them look like oceans, although they're not. They sort of stand out, so they're not that difficult to find. You need 6 of 12 impact craters. Those are the most prominent craters on the face of the moon, so those are relatively straightforward to find. Solar system objects, you need to find some of the planets. You can even plot the orbital motion of a planet over several nights. If you've got clear skies several days in a row, you can observe 3 artificial satellites, including spacecraft and ISS, and 3 meteors. You can even do sunspots if you've got the proper equipment to do it. Make sure that you do that safely. You need proper white light filters, so you need a hydrogen alpha scope, is what I use. If you're looking for those satellites, this is a good site to use, Heavens Above, created by a German astronomer, and it will take you to all of the different maps that you need to find all of these sorts of things. There are optional observations as well. You can put solar or lunar eclipses in there. There was just an annular eclipse on Thursday, but it wasn't visible from our end of the country. But a lot of our colleagues back east were chasing after that. Zodiacal light, you're not going to be able to worry about at this time of year. That's something you find in the spring and in the fall. And there are deep sky objects, and most of these are Messier list objects. There's a few from the Malot list. There's even an asterism or 2 on there. And there are double and multiple stars. So let's focus on the summer targets that you need if you're going to be doing this exploring, the Explore the Universe program. Here are the summer constellations and the bright stars that you're going to need. So basically, when you're looking south from our observatory up at the airport, right there on the horizon, you're going to see Scorpius sticking up above the horizon. Part of it's going to be down below, but there's that very distinct 3 star lines coming away from Antares, which is one of the brightest stars out there. And it's quite easy to see. Up above it, you're going to see the Keystone, which is the middle of the constellation Hercules. That's another one you're going to need to know. Off to the left of Scorpius, you're going to find a teapot, which is the constellation Sagittarius, and the steam coming out of the spout of the teapot is the Milky Way. Up here, you've got the brightest star, which is Lyra, or Vega, which is next to the constellation Lyra. Down here, you've got Aquila, the eagle, with Altair, and up over here, next to Sagittarius, you've got Capricornus. Again, this is tucked right down next to the horizon. And up here, you've got this cross in the sky right in the middle of the Milky Way, which is the constellation Cygnus. And these three stars, Deneb, Vega, Vega down to Altair, and then back to Deneb, that's the summer triangle. If you hear amateur astronomers talking about that, those are the first three stars you're going to see in the sky as it starts to get dark in the summer sky. So that's a good place for people to start. So let's look at some of the deep sky objects that you can chase after. Let's go to the Hercules cluster first. That's about 2,500 light years away. It's about 145 light years across. It contains about 300,000 stars. This is absolutely beautiful. When we're doing observing at the observatory, we generally start as it's getting dark with double stars. And the very next thing we will go to is things like globular clusters, because that will give you an idea of how dark it's gotten and how deep into the sky you're going to be able to see. But if you wait until you've got a really good dark sky, this is the kind of view you're going to get. It's real jewel plot. So to find this, there's that keystone I was talking about a moment ago, like the keystone in an arch. And right there, about a third of the way down that side, that's where you're going to find the Hercules cluster. Quite easy to find. Messier 4 is another beautiful globular cluster in Scorpius. It's magnitude 5.8. It's about 7,200 light years away, a little further away, 35 light years across. This one's a little harder to see because, as you can see here, there's that three-star line spread from Antares just above the southern horizon there. It's quite close to the horizon, which means you're looking through about 3 times as much air because you're looking across the atmosphere rather than straight up. So if you were further south, you'd get a better view of this, but still the view is pretty good. It's quite an impressive object. Messier 16, the Eagle Nebula, is a young open cluster of stars. It was discovered back in the 18th century. The nebula surrounding this is known as the Eagle and Star Queen Nebula, which are references to the dark silhouette near the center of it. And it contains several active star-forming gas and dust regions. So the way to do this, there's that teapot. And if you take Alnaso, which is the star at the end of the spout, and then Mu Sagittarius, which is that star in that line above the lid, and you follow it straight up, and then you make another line across the bottom of the constellation Scutum, which is that kind of a bent triangle there. They basically meet right where the Eagle Nebula is. Pretty straightforward. The Lagoon Nebula is a giant interstellar cloud in the constellation Sagittarius. It's an emission nebula and it's an H2 region. It's one of two nebula rather, that are visible to the unaided eye in the dark sky. So the other one is the Orion Nebula. When you're looking at constellation Orion and the sword, right in the middle there, you can see that there's this glowing cloud. That's the Orion Nebula. Same thing with the Lagoon. If you get a good dark sky, you'll look at the teapot there, which is Sagittarius, and you draw a line between those two stars, Mu Sagittarius, and down to this other star off of the spout there, right about the middle of that line. That's where you're going to be able to see it, and you should be able to see it quite easily if it's a dark sky. Again, this is close to the horizon, so the further south you go, the better it's going to view, but there it is right there. Omega Nebula is nearby. It's also known as the Swan Nebula, the check mark of the horseshoe. It's about 6,000 light years away. It's one of the brightest and most massive star-forming regions in our galaxy. The open star cluster NGC 6618 causes the gases of the nebula to shine due to the radiation from these young hot stars. And it's one of the youngest clusters known, about 1 million years old. So there's the Eagle Nebula. I was just showing you how to get that by drawing these two lines. If you just go down below it, follow that arrow there, that's where it is. They're right next to each other, basically. Messier 22 in Sagittarius. The brightest stars are 11th magnitude, so this is something you're going to hear slightly larger telescope to really appreciate, but you can see it with a small telescope. An 8-inch telescope is probably the best size to resolve this. It's about 10,000 light years away. Spans about 32 minutes on the sky, which translates to a spatial diameter of about 99 light years. And again, this is one of those that's right down close to the horizon. So again, if you go south, you're going to bring it higher, and there'll be less air between you and it, and it'll be a little easier to see, but you can see it quite clearly from where we are, nonetheless. So where you're going to go for that one, there's that teapot again, and just to the left of the lid on the top there, that's where you're going to find the Great Sagittarius cluster, Messier 22. 23 is down the same area. It's an open cluster, so this is a more spread out group of stars. Magnitude 5.5, so it's right on the edge of unaided eye, viewing about 2,150 light years away, about 15 to 20 light years across. It's about 150 stars in this cluster. So it's basically up above the lid of the teapot, just over in that direction where you see the arrow there. The Sagittarius star cloud, Messier 24, is quite large. It's about 600 light years wide. It's part of the Sagittarius arm of the Milky Way. It's the most dense concentration of individual stars visible using binoculars, with around 1,000 stars visible within a single field of view. And it's got several prominent dark nebulae. Two of them you see in this image here, Bernard 93 and 92. And it's got various other clusters and even some planetary nebula in there. So for this, we were looking at the area above the teapot. You see, Messier 23 is just to the right of this large star cloud, and the Omega Nebula and the Eagle Nebula are just above it. They're all basically in the same part of the sky. Messier 25 is another open cluster. It's about 2,000 light years away. It's about 67 million years old, about 13 light years across. For that, you take that star, Mu Sagittaria, which is that star up above the lid there in that line, and then you draw a line in with the bottom corner of sputum there, right in the middle of that line. That's where you're going to find Messier 25, about halfway between those two stars. Another way you could do it is to take Caus Australis, which is the star in the bottom right corner of the teapot, and the star, which is the peak of the lid there, Caus Borealis, and just draw a line up. It'll take you straight to it. Pretty straightforward. Messier 11, which is the wild duck cluster. It's in the constellation Scutum. Its popular name derives from the brighter stars forming a rough triangle, which some people believe resembles a flying cloud of ducks. I think it's a beautiful object, but I don't necessarily see it as a cloud of ducks myself. But anyway, about 316 million years old. It's about, the core radius is about 4 light years across. So up there in the top left of the middle there, you can see that bent triangle, which is the constellation Scutum. And right there, just to one side of the top, the apex there is where the wild duck cluster is. Now, this is an asterism. It's on the calendar list, calendar 399. It's called Brocchi's cluster or Alciphei's cluster or the coat hanger. And I happen to know that Danny, who was at the meeting here, just about every time I've gone to the observatory, he's showing somebody the coat hanger. This is one of his favorites. But it's an asterism, not a star cluster. In fact, it's actually two overlapping star clusters that make up this particular structure. They're both in the Malat catalog. So to find this, there's Cygnus, which is that cross in the sky. You can see the 3 stars, Vega, Deneb, and Altair, which are the summer triangle. And if you draw a line from Vega up there in the top center down to Altair and Aquila, it's pretty much on that line, just a little bit closer to Aquila than to Lyra there, and just off to one side of Alberia, which is that N star in that cross, which is Cygnus. So if you zoom in, you notice in this view, there is a minor constellation Sagitta, which is just down to one side. If you zoom in, there's Sagitta, the whole constellation. kind of looks like a tuning fork. And there I've highlighted where the coat hanger is. And like I said, it's pretty distinct, quite a nice one. Let's look at some of the summer double and multiple stars that are out there. So there are quite a few around the constellation Lyra. And the first one is Nazar Awaki, or Zeta Lyrae 1 and 2, which is that star right there, right on that corner of the parallelogram next to Vega. And that is a double star that looks like that if you use the telescope. Then, sort of forming an equilateral triangle with that star and with Vega is this here. And this is called the double-double, Epsilon Lyrae 1 and 2. And if you zoom in, you're going to see here's one, and there's the other, two sets of double stars. The other corner of the parallelogram there, Delta Lyrae 1 and 2, that's also a double star. So it's that pair right there. So if you're looking for double stars to show people, just go to Lyra and you've got a whole bunch of them right there, 3, all next to each other. If we go down to Capricornus, which is just going to be to the left of the teapot there, Sagittarius, and just above the southern horizon, you will notice that this star, right at the very end of the constellation, Algady, or Alpha Capricornus, that is a double star. It looks like this. And Devi, which is the star next to it, Beta Capricorni, that is also a double star. Quite colorful. Looks like that. Now, if you go to Cygnus, there's Lyra. We were looking at that a moment ago, right next to it, constellation Cygnus. And if you roughly draw a line between Deneb and that star, which is the first star out in the wing there of Cygnus, you'll find Omicron Cygnus. And this is the only triple star on the list. So you can see there where we've zoomed into a point where you can see the 3, and now we've zoomed in again so you can really closely see the 3 stars. So if you really want to impress everybody and you're doing the Explore the Universe, go for the triple star. It's worth doing. This one is one I show people all the time. It's such an easy one to find. It's the head of Cygnus the Swan there. And the reason I like to show it to people is it's such a color contrast. You can clearly see that one is a young hot blue star and one is an amber colored star. So I'll be back in the autumn with more double stars and more targets, but those are all things that you can work on. Let me also mention there are variable stars now in the 3rd edition. They talk about Myra and Algol and how they vary in brightness, and there are a whole lot of amateur astronomers that chase after variable stars. There's even an organization, the AAVSO, where people are constantly helping scientists by getting the light curves for these things. But let me also talk about a couple of other observing programs. If you're looking for things to do, Explore the Moon is an equally easy program to do. It bridges the gap between the Explore the Universe, where they ask you to chase after a couple of simple objects, and the more challenging Isabel Williamson. There's a binocular version with 40 features, and there's a telescope version with 94. They're both listed in the Observer's Handbook. You can get them on the website, and it's a relatively simple program. Isabel Williamson, I just completed this. It's a really, really good program. If you're really interested in geology, you're going to love this, because this is all about studying geological features all over the moon. There's a lot of stuff. This takes a while to do. I am going to admit to you that I'm not interested in geology. I'm more interested in physics, chasing after nebula and galaxies and things. But I did this, and I'm glad I did it. It was a really good program. I would highly recommend it if you're looking at a challenge. And the nice thing about this and the Explore the Moon is you don't necessarily have to view at night, because the moon's up in broad daylight for part of its cycle. You can do a lot of this in the middle of the day. Something to think about. Messier is the program that I went and completed immediately after I did Explore the Universe, because a lot of the objects that I've just shown you in the summer sky are Messier objects. And so you've already got yourself a start on this list. You might as well go and get all the rest of the 110 objects and complete it. So it's a relatively straightforward program, and it's well worth the effort. You can actually, if you're absolutely mad and you want to knock yourself out, there's a couple of days a year when you can get all the objects in one night. I wouldn't recommend it. Probably something you want to do over the space of a year. Finest NGC is another really good program with 110 objects. They're all on the new general catalog or IC index catalog list. Well worth chasing after. Deep Sky Challenge is something that Alan Dyer and Alistair Lane put together. There's no overlap with the finest NGC list, although this is mostly NGC object. It is more challenging. You will need a slightly larger telescope for this one. So there you see there's some really good stuff in there, including objects in the Bernard catalog and Palomar. Deep Sky Gems is something that David Levy put together. Wrote about it. It's based on his Deep Sky Objects book that came out in 2005. There's many objects in the NGC and IC. It's even got some really unique objects in it, as you can see here. It's got more. This is a larger list, 154 objects. It'll take you a little while to do. This you'll probably need a larger telescope for because some of them are rather dim. There is, of course, also solar observing. Our club spends more hours on this than any other kind of observing, actually, when we do our outreach events. And there is a solar observer's handbook, which some guy named Charles Ennis wrote, which I would recommend if you're interested in learning how to do this safely. So if you don't have a telescope, come see us. People are donating scopes all the time, and we are attempting to make them available to people. I got two sitting behind me in the office right now, actually, came in the last month. We have, of course, our observatory up at the airport, which at the moment, people have been asking about it because we're starting to think about coming out of this lockdown situation, but we're kind of locked out at the moment because they are extending the runway at the airport, which is interfering with our original access road. And so they have to create a new access on the opposite side of the airfield, and they haven't done that yet, but we'll be sure to let you all know when that we do get that. And of course, one of the other telescopes we have up there is the Nairn Robertson Memorial Scope, which was something that our beloved member Nairn Robertson got from the Make-A-Wish program and was active using as well as with the big telescope before he passed away. And it's named in honor of him. He was First Nations, and we would like to invite any youth out there to come up and use the telescope to view the sky. We'll give you a mentor to show you how to use the scope, but that's what Nairn would have wanted. So that's it, unless anyone has any questions.